Welcome to Beneath the Branches, the podcast for the adoption and foster care clinic where we sit in the shade of shared experience. The heart is normalized and belonging is built one honest conversation at a time. Adoption, foster care, or kinship placement brings deep joy and real challenges, and we're here to talk about all of it. The hard, the heartwarming, and everything in between. So grab a cup of coffee, take a deep breath, and join us as we hold space for the messy, beautiful work of building connection beneath the branches.
Welcome back to Beneath the Branches. I am Dr. Jennifer Chambers, and I'm joined here with Caitlin and Kelly, our counselors here at the Adoption Foster Care Clinic. Today, we are going to talk about safety. So we're in a season where we're talking about the first 6 months home. A lot of what we deal with in the first 6 months home is safety for the child, safety for the family, and building felt safety for the child. So, but first, we're going to do our opening ritual.
Mm-hmm. Yes, which is, if this is your first podcast, like a fun thing we've created to allow people to hear us talk about things that are not so serious and clinical and get to know our personalities a little bit, which are lovely.
Well, and also the second reason is because podcasting is awkward for us.
Yes.
And so
we need a segue.
we need a segue,
Yes.
like something to
Yeah.
loosen us up a little bit.
Yes. So our question today, we're gonna say what we think Dr. Chambers would have chosen as a career other than what she is currently doing.
Okay, and I haven't heard these answers.
Right. She hasn't heard these answers. We haven't ever said them out loud.
Uh-huh.
And so we'll talk about what we think she might be,
Uh-huh.
and then she can give us some feedback.
Okay.
And I'm curious to see if Kelly and I think the same thing.
Know.
All right. If I wasn't doing this,
Uh-huh.
what would I be doing for a career?
Honestly, I think that you would be a great psychiatrist / counselor.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've told you that before,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
But because like her bedside manner is just like
Mhm.
so warm and comforting, like
Yeah.
I think people love that. But also just really good with like assessing and medications are huge for a
Uh-huh.
lot of our kids. So I could
Yes.
totally see you as a psychiatrist or counselor.
Yes. I think too, like you are great at making people feel comfortable
Mhm.
and safe. Like you do that very quickly.
Mhm.
Super warm.
It's that sprinkle dust we talk about, like
Uh-huh.
the magic fairy
Yes.
that she goes and sprinkles around.
Yes.
Everybody's
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff. That is not what I would have said. Because in my mind, I go to like there are no limits on what you could achieve for yourself. So like this is not in line with what the rest of your life looks like now, your other responsibilities. So like professional motorcyclist.
oh, yes.
I was hoping that would be in the category.
Oh,
Yes, that's where I went.
I didn't even
Yes,
think
like
about that.
if all like there's no limits on you and you could pursue a passion, you would be like in a motorcycle gang. And then you would also be like doing stunts and racing and all the things.
Oh man.
Well, that will be my retirement,
Right.
right?
Yes.
I want to see that now. I want
Yeah.
to see Jennifer as like
I know. In a gang. Would you still wear a cardigan or would you don a leather jacket?
I would advocate for tattoos.
Same.
Okay.
I think you need some tattoos.
Tattoos, leather
Yes.
jacket for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
I changed my answer. I like
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Street Jennifer.
So this is a great segue into safety.
Yes.
That's funny. I can't wait to roast y'all on this next time. Okay.
What would you pick if you had to, like, if you no limits on yourself,
Yeah.
any career you wanted?
It would be in the counseling field,
Mhm.
like psychiatry counseling. Yeah. And then the hobby.
would be street biker gang.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dirt bike. I like the dirt.
biker.
We know you so well.
Look at that.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So safety in the first 6 months home. So when a child comes home, family life can feel both tender and intense. Because you're building attachment, you're building routines, you're building trust, but you're also navigating something that people don't usually talk about regularly, and that's safety. So, because sometimes that transition can look like aggressive behavior, it can look like rough play with siblings or unsafe play with siblings. It can look like sexualized behavior. And that dysregulation usually will just spill over to the people closest to them. So the goal is to create safety without creating shame for the child.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting because the first 6 months home, a child is coming into a safe environment, often from an unsafe environment. So we expect all of a sudden behaviors to calm, but it doesn't always. So why doesn't it calm? And why are those behaviors often, unsafe behaviors, often escalated in the first 6 months home?
Mhm.
Well, I mean, I think the most obvious answer is that, like control. A kid's need for control, you
Mhm.
know,
Okay.
like when you transition a kid from like an unsafe environment to a safe environment, first of all, that's really vulnerable. You're asking a child to do, or at least be in an environment that is not normal, not typical for them.
Mhm.
So that in and of itself can bring a lot of like hesitancy, vulnerability, fear.
Mhm.
And when that happens, a lot of our kids try to control things. And when our kids have experienced really hard past, really hard experiences, trauma previously, then a lot of times like that comes back up.
Yeah, you're asking them to like expect and believe that the adults in the room are safe when they've not encountered that.
Yeah.
So it's like this expectation that you should know I'm safe and your behavior should reflect that.
Yeah.
But they don't even have a definition of what consistent safety and care looks like yet.
Mm-hmm. And then too, as we create felt safety, which we need to define, but as we create that, then it allows a child to feel safer, and therefore their behaviors might start to show themselves as well.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What is felt safety?
Felt safety, I think, was originally coined by TCU, the Care and Purpose Child Development Center. But felt safety just means the child being able to feel safe. It's
Mhm.
not the parent knowing that the child is safe because that happens
Mhm.
regularly, but it's the child feeling the
Right.
feeling of being safe.
Yeah, that like invisible safety net that like kind of holds us all in place and keeps us
Mhm.
feeling stable and secure.
Right. Right. And a child's definition of or how a child feels safe may not be the same way an adult feels safe. So it's again ensuring that we're doing things to promote felt safety for the child.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Probably the biggest one that we get calls about is aggression. In the first, hitting, biting, kicking, threats towards siblings or animals, and then even just intense tantrums that feel unsafe, throwing objects, things like that. Where does this aggression come from? One thing I thought of is that it's a survival strategy. Any other thoughts on that? And how to view aggression when you're a mom or dad who just is excited that child's home with you finally?
I always like anger to me is the strongest emotion. It's like the most defensive emotion. So um to me it presents itself first often because it feels safest and it lends the child to feeling the most in control. Because when we're sad and when we are grieving or we're weak, that feels awful for a child who's never had any sort of safety or care, you know? So anger is protective and defensive. And so usually if parents can look at this behavior as an effort to protect themselves instead of hurt me or hurt somebody in their surroundings, they're able to build enough empathy within their own bodies that they can respond, kind of level the threat, you know? So when you see somebody being physically aggressive, your brain can send off alarm bells as an adult even, and you start responding to that child as if they're a threat. But if we can remind ourselves this child is desperately trying to keep themselves safe, then we can swap to a more appropriate response that's leveled at the child, not at their behavior.
Yeah, maybe we can talk through some of those responses, because you definitely want to protect the whole family, protect the child. And so often we increase supervision, and that's not as a sign as a punishment, but as a protection of the other of everyone in the family. What other things do you practically recommend with aggression?
And just a note on that too is especially when we're adopting or fostering or getting kids who are a little older into the home, I always recommend like putting some of these things in place day one, because it can build shame. It can build shame even then, but it can be even more shameful for our kids if you see behaviors and then you put these things in place, because then it connects these rules, these boundaries directly to my behavior,
Exactly.
and so I think it's really important just for families to be prepared to put a lot of boundaries and preventative techniques and things in place prior to a child even getting home. So I think that's really important.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
There's practical
Oh, yeah.
steps to take to provide safety during aggression and to de-escalate aggression.
Yeah.
I think preventative versus reactive when we can. We don't always get that opportunity because sometimes we don't see things coming. But avoiding situations in which a child may be brought to anger.
Right.
And that's going to be child specific, really, based on their history. Like if a child had food insecurity, we don't want to put them in a situation where they're going to feel competitive for food.
Right.
That could cause anger, So just thinking several steps ahead to avoid, until the child builds more safety, to avoid triggering events for them would be one.
Right. Yeah, I had a child this past week, and she was always melting down in restaurants. Well, she's not ready for restaurants at this point. Do you know what I mean? She's still within the first 6 months home. She's letting you know. She's signaling, I'm not ready yet. So just avoiding those situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also avoiding, to me, you can't, sometimes the word no makes a child very aggressive. So if that's happening, finding ways to say no that don't involve the word no
Absolutely,
is
yeah.
a wonderful technique.
Yeah.
Right?
You're still holding the same boundaries and same structure. You're just doing it in a way that continues trust and connection.
Yeah.
It's not, people feel like that's so permissive when you say, don't say no.
Right.
It's not that you're not relinquishing boundaries and structure. You're just being intentional with your wording so that you can build connection.
Yeah. And still restricting the same activity.
Right.
Let's do this instead.
Yeah.
Is no, and guised in better wording that's not as triggering for children who take no as feeling unsafe.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't mean we never can say no. We're just really speaking a lot in the first 6 months, and especially while a child is still triggered by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think kind of steps wise, you have to first make sure immediate safety is provided, but then kind of to separate the child, to regulate the child, and then to connect.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And I also think it's really important to have plans if you have other children in the home, because again, our kids' moments of dysregulation can look really big and it can be dangerous at
It
times,
can be.
And so if you have other kids in the home, not only are you going to try to separate the child who is dysregulated, but those other kids need to have a plan for what they can do and where they can go if behaviors get big or if it becomes unsafe. So a lot of times that is, you help your other kids fix like a cozy corner in their room, or they clear out a space in their closet where they can go. They have like noise canceling headphones or earbuds that they can listen to music. They have like snacks. You make it like really cozy and safe for them, because it needs to be concrete. It needs to be something, this is where you go, and a plan for when things calm down, what happens. So I'll come get you, as soon as things calm down, and what they can do when they're in that space.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And I think too, how we talk to our other kids about the child needs to be not negative. Yeah. And even talking, a lot of parents will talk about the episodes maybe to a family member in front of the child.
Yeah.
Right. And that's very discouraging and only promotes the behavior. So being very careful with our words with siblings and with other family members, especially if the child's in earshot.
And I think kind of what you said, like prevention is really important. And then if you can't prevent before the moment of dysregulation starts, then a lot of times our kids go from, we say, like 0 to 100 in less than a second. So there's no like trying to regulate them in between. However, as kids get better at co-regulation and at regulating, then sometimes there is a brief moment where you can see the build up before full blown, the light
Switch.
flips.
Uh-huh.
And so, when we have that moment, there's a lot of like sensory things that we can do to help, prevent big moments of dysregulation from
Mhm.
happening. But again, I would expect that when a child first enters into the home, that there is not that moment in time where that's available. Like again, 0 to 100 very quickly. So my rule of thumb is when that happens, is to stay as close as possible without making it worse. So again, depending on the child's age, if you can bring them close to you and sit them in your lap, and help regulate them that way with affection and comfort and nurture, great. But sometimes our kids are uncomfortable with that, especially within the first 6 months. So
Mhm.
if that makes it worse, then sitting next to them and like maintaining physical contact. If that makes it worse, or you can't do that while keeping everybody safe, then you stay in the same room where they can see you. If that doesn't work, then you stand right outside the door,
Mhm.
And so, like, it's like a step process, but it's all about, again, teaching safety through co-regulation and remaining close.
Yeah. And you avoid that shame piece by staying close. Like
Right.
that's why it's so important because like the message that's not being spoken if we separate ourselves is that you're bad.
Yeah.
Your behavior is shameful
Yeah.
or like,
You're too much.
yeah, I'm afraid of you, like the power
Mhm.
switches when the parent is like fleeing from the kid.
Uh-huh.
So it's for regulation and just security. The message to the child needs to be your feelings are big, but they're not too big for
Yeah.
me. Like I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then you stay present.
Mhm. And presence doesn't necessarily mean like talking.
Right.
You
It
know?
usually doesn't mean
Right.
talking. Yeah.
Because that can escalate something a
Yes.
lot faster than
Uh-huh.
anything else. Is continuing to try to talk,
Yes.
So it's just like, I might say something like, "Hey, bud, I can tell like, your emotions are really big. It seemed like you're really mad. I'm here whenever you're ready, like
Mhm.
mom's here. It's okay. I'm here." And then you just stay close until you get like a break. And then a lot of times what I will recommend, and it all depends on the child and how they're responding, but a lot of times like there'll be like a moment of like de-escalation where things are coming down. And then if you like speak into that and you're like, you say something again, short phrases like, "Hey, I'm here. Like, what do you want a sip of water?" Like, a lot of times then that is when you can like enter into like a more like sensory technique. But sometimes if you do it too soon, it's going to amp it back up again. So
Mhm.
I think the important thing to remember is that the first 6 months home, they're learning you and you're learning them too. So you're
Mhm.
just gathering information about like what helps your kid and what doesn't help your kid.
Mm. That's a good word.
Yeah.
One safety concern that feels very heavy for most families is sexualized behavior. Um, why do kids have sexualized behavior when they first come in? Um, and how do we handle it? That's a big question. Well, maybe we'll start with why they have it.
I mean, most of our kids, the statistics, like if they've been in any sort of care, foster care, homes with other children,
Orphanage, yeah.
orphanage, yeah, like the statistics are very high that they've been exposed, if not directly abused, sexually abused. So sometimes it's observing it happening, sometimes it's inappropriate or explicit material on a TV. That's a big one where we're hearing that kids were exposed to porn from a very young age. And we know that kids process because they don't have the emotional maturity, vocabulary yet to verbally process what they've been through. So it comes out in play.
Yeah.
And so that's a way for them to work out what's happened through their bodies is by like showing and acting out what's happened to them. That's one side. The other side is that, it can be regulating. There are parts, there are, things released in the body and endorphins released in the brain, when you engage in certain sexual behavior. And so it can be a coping mechanism that may or may not be indicative of abuse, like it's not necessarily an indication that a child was abused, but
I think people would be especially surprised at how often we see that.
Yeah.
Like how often we see self-stimulation as a coping mechanism, even for a 3-year-old.
Yes.
Right. And then families just don't know how to handle it. But we have to remember it is not a sexualized. They're not thinking, they don't have a concept of understanding that this is a sexual behavior. It's just calming for them and being able to react in the right way with an understanding that this is a physiological experience for this child. This is not, doesn't define what this child's going to be like sexually later. It doesn't define who the child is. It tells you very little about the child, actually, other than, okay, they have figured out this calms them down and this relaxes
I
them.
think we can likely say that they've been through stress and there was not an adult there to help regulate. They didn't have anybody to co-regulate, so this is one way that they learned to regulate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just going to say, like, I think that's a really important distinction to be gathering information in order to be able to make, because there's a big difference in more typical behavior like masturbation. And then there is a big difference between that and then sexualized behavior that may be indicative of
Abuse.
or exposure.
Exactly.
And that's a huge distinction. And we would say to respond in different ways also, but that's something that we can help with.
Yes. Yeah. And there's certain signs like when parents come to us and report a concerning behavior, just from working in this field, we can say this is likely because this child's been exposed. Like this is not what we would fall under the category of typical sexualized behavior, developmental sexualized behavior. So if that's something parents feel uncomfortable or unsure about making the distinction between, that's a great time to reach out and talk to somebody here, especially, that can help.
And we always talk about too, like how important prevention is, and just like expectations. So I like when I'm able to like work with a family prior to a child coming into their home, I always tell families, depending on kind of like what they're open to, like what their like checklist says about the type of children that they're willing to like adopt or foster. A lot of times we have discussions about like, listen, you should have it. It should be an expectation that something may have happened to a child that's coming into your home. So let's go ahead and put up some safety measures to prevent other things from happening. And so again, like what I said before, it's really important that we implement these measures before that child gets there. So again, like cameras, video cameras are like door monitors, like having rules like if there's younger children in the home, children with special needs, children who are developmentally younger than the child who's coming into your home, like you already have boundaries and rules like no, like they can't be in a room with a shut door. Like all interactions have to be supervised, like you need to go ahead and have some of those boundaries in place before that child even comes into your home.
Yep. And be comfortable yourself talking about these things and saying anatomically correct words. Like if that makes you feel funny, start practice, look in the mirror, and start saying these things to yourself. Like these are going to be conversations that your child needs to be able to have with you and feel confident that you can handle it. And our kids are so perceptive and they pick up on so quickly of any discomfort that they may feel they're causing you. And so if you let in that like that subject is something that you have a hard time with, they will shield you from it for lots of reasons, like for fear of rejection or just like not feeling safe. So parents need to like do their own little mental checklist of like, how am I going to do this? Can I do it? What's my own history? What's going to be triggering? What's the messaging I grew up with? Like there's so many things parents need to do just in preparation to be able to handle these things well.
And then I would say having like practice runs with your biological children if you have biological children, because they need that too, right? They need to be able to talk about sexual things in an open way with their parent. Because if something does happen, they need to be able to come to you and not feel shame. And that's not just with that child, but with, family members at family gatherings. I mean, this is something that everyone needs to be comfortable talking about openly.
And it's a protective measure because usually if a perpetrator is interacting with a child that has the proper words and can talk about things, they know this child is likely talking to another adult. And so like it is also a protective measure for kids to have these conversations.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I like the being proactive, because then it doesn't, if something does happen, then there's not that shame attached. Now we have to change everything we do because you did this.
Yes.
Right. Other things that proactively are, like you said, supervision levels. I mean, often we'll say, no matter what you know about that child, don't allow them to be alone with other children for at least 6 months, I know we
Right,
say.
yeah.
Sometimes we say a year if their history warrants it. And then also bedroom, bathroom structure. Again, being proactive so that things couldn't happen out of sight of you. And then technology boundaries. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah.
The big one.
Yeah. It is a big one. I mean, nothing is safe. I mean, like, yeah, Kindle will alight your ears with pleasures of men. You know, like there are no boundaries. Like kids can find all sorts of things,
you can
know,
get
like
to YouTube through Kindle.
well, yeah, but you can hear racy stories, you know, like pornographic novels. You can find all sorts of stuff. So, you know, lots of really the first 6 months home, you should be avoiding tech as much as possible. You know, like just like those are things we save for when like I absolutely need to check out for a minute as a parent. And so I'm going to utilize this to benefit me. But we should not really have unsupervised or even supervised tech use first 6 months home.
Yeah. I would agree. That's, again, only if you're needing it as a parent to check out and you've still got to be close by.
Right. Because not only for safety, but it allows your child to escape that doesn't involve you, you know, so it does hinder attachment too.
And it can be tricky. Like I know sometimes we have kids come into care where that's how like that was their primary comfort measure was having a screen, you know, so there it can be really difficult to do that, but we are teaching a new way of connecting. And there's no better time to do that than to say our family does it different, you know, like instead of coming in with it and then trying to pull it away later.
Exactly. Exactly. And then having a no secrets policy in the house.
Yes.
Yeah. Would be another thing to just put in place from the beginning.
Yeah.
That's a tricky one too, because I like even grandparents sometimes like we really have to educate family on that one and being like, there's surprises, we can have surprises.
Right. And the difference between a surprise.
Yes, a surprise and a secret. Yeah.
And I think we have talked a lot about this already, but just protecting every child when we're thinking about protecting every child in the home, then it is important to validate the siblings' feelings if we're seeing aggression, anxiety, and Kelly mentioned that already of having a place where they can go that they're comfortable. But I think it is important to have separate times with each of your children who've already been in the home to just say, how you feeling, bud? And not to respond emotionally too big if they're just saying, I hate them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's fair.
And for them to be able to, you know, I think it's great for you to jot down their feelings if they're not, you know, old enough, or if they just don't want to jot down their feelings, you jot down their feelings and kind of have a log of how they're feeling so that they can feel seen and heard and know that their feelings are valid and that it will change. But right now, this is how you feel, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, when we're trying to create safety, we're talking about doing all these things, but it also really matters how we do them emotionally. So, for example, our tone is very crucial to how we set these boundaries and how we respond to aggression, using a calm voice, clear rules, predictable follow through, and then correcting the behavior without attacking the child's identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because otherwise, we just add to the aggression if we're not doing those things. Yeah. So that can really help de escalate. But sometimes it's hard to do that because you have all these fears. You have fears as a parent. What does this mean my child's going to end up like?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, they're attacking people. Are they going to be a psychopath? They have sexualized behaviors. Are they going to be have perverted
Sexually deviant.
sexually deviant? Yes. You know, so what are some of those myths that we need to bust so that parents can actually do this work without getting in their head and being what we call false prophets, you know, about the child's future?
I think Caitlin said it best when we're talking about like true abnormal sexual behavior. It's because of something that happened to them, not who they are.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, so I think
Yeah.
that's the most important thing to understand. And when they're reenacting abuse, it's because they are trying to process and work it out,
Yeah.
work out something that happened to them.
Yeah.
You know, so it has zero to do with who they are, their character. It has zero to do with that. And on the other end, with behaviors that are typical, that are more sexualized, I think it's important for, again, when we've said it, but it's really important for people to hear that that is normal. Like masturbation is normal. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that anything's wrong with their
Mhm.
child, and it doesn't mean it's sexual. You're
Mhm.
again, your child is not doing it because it's sexual to them. It's because it feels good. And I always, this is kind of like a silly example, but I always tell families, like, I liken it to like sucking a thumb. Like that is, so many kids suck their thumbs, and
Yeah.
it's because it's soothing. It's self-soothing for them.
Mhm.
Same thing with masturbation. It's soothing. So again, I know because of all the records that we as adults have in our heads, it feels much different, but it's really not.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And we tend to go to the sexualized
Yeah.
part and go, oh my gosh, what does this mean? What does this mean?
Right.
When it can be a normal developmental moment, or it can be a, like Caitlin said, they as a self-soothing tactic because they didn't have that self-soothing from an adult. It could be either one.
Right. Yeah.
And also aggression too. I mean, I think it's so easy to label a child based on the first month's home. Oh my goodness. I mean, like, even the people who are well read and ready for these adoptions, there's just no way to not think these thoughts in your head, right? And just to know that these thoughts are normal, but yet it's just not true. I mean, healing is possible for any child. Trauma can be overcome, and I'd always tell families, just don't assume what your child's going to be like in the future based on their first 6 months home. It's just not the same kid. It may be a completely different child later, and to just hold out hope and expectations that this is going to be a different child in 6 to 12 months. And even that's why we always even avoid diagnoses in the first 6 months home. You can't diagnose ADHD or ODD in the first 6 months home because this is not the child's normal physiological and biological presentation. This is a trauma response that might be very temporary.
Right. And can extend beyond 6 months,
Yeah.
depending on the child's age and history.
Exactly.
It's, and I tell parents too, like these kiddos have trauma triggers that are unseen and unknown to even them. So if we're doing great, we are coasting, and all of a sudden something happens, seen or unseen, and we see a spike in behavior that we haven't seen in a long time, that does not mean, again, that we're destined for bad things. It just means that like we had a trigger.
Right.
And like that's a part of the process, like we repeat some of these behaviors as we develop and grow and add more skill and healing along the way. And so even seeing behaviors peak back up through all these key developmental stages does not mean that that's who we are going to be.
Right. Right.
I see a lot of families then at that point, they feel hopeless, and then they look back on the biological parents who may have never had intervention, may have had trauma but never had intervention. And so they have mental illness, they have drug and alcohol abuse, and then they automatically project that biological parent's future on this child. And it's just not a fair assessment, not a healthy assessment, because so much intervention will occur that didn't happen for those biological parents.
I think the like risk and the danger in all of that is when we allow these behaviors as parents to scare us and like lead us to define our child, is that we pull away and we know that healing happens through connection and nurture and care. And if we pull away from our child and we distance ourselves, we create the self-fulfilling prophecy. We are giving power to their trauma, and we are saying, this is who you are.
Right.
And we're not providing the opportunity for the child to learn and heal through our connection. And so just like can be a slippery slope. Parents have to continue to do their own work alongside the healing of their child so that they can remain consistent and connected when things get hard. And it's not going to be like, oh, I did this hard 6 months and now my child's great. The road is smooth from here on out. It is going to be something they consistently process in different ways as their child grows and develops.
I like what you said about the parents continuing to do their own work, because it is an opportunity to see some of your own childhood trauma, because that child's going to bring it out. The way you respond to aggression and any kind of behaviors, that sexualized behaviors, things like that, are going to just shine a light on any of your own childhood traumas and your own thoughts about these behaviors. When to seek help. Like, when is it important? I mean, granted, we would love everyone to be here preventatively, because we feel like you need someone to walk through this. Even, I had been doing this for 15 years before our last adoption, and I desperately needed the clinic to help me walk through that. And from our first adoptions, where, you just need somebody to walk you through it. But if whether you're plugged in or not, if things are escalating, like, what are some signs that you need outside intervention and you need to reach out?
I think parent overwhelm is a big
Mm.
sign. Again, we hope that we can get you in the door before that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But when parents really start to feel overwhelmed or confused by behavior, I think that's a good time to give us a call, because we can help with that. We can help validate, we can help sort through, kind of figure out what the core need behind your child's behavior is. And I think that could be a good time for a call.
Yeah, I mean, if you feel yourself withdrawing from your kid, like you can feel it's creating this withdrawal from them, or, intense pullback or whatever, I think it's time to reach out. Because that first 6 months home, there's so much, it's such fertile ground for attachment. It's hard, but it's there's so much good that can happen. And if we withdraw and don't reach out and get help during that time period, we really lose what is such a moldable, powerful time to build that foundation.
And I would say if your other kids are struggling, because if your other kids are struggling, you're not going to have much bandwidth, because nothing will hurt a mama or daddy's heart more than the kids they're already attached to feeling like this was a bad idea. That's a very scary place to be, because you might not be attached yet to the new child, but you're firmly attached to the others. And when you see them hurting, it does make you question, did I do the right thing? And if you're feeling that would be a good sign to get help, so you're not walking through this alone, and that you have plenty of emotional energy for everyone in the home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this is great. Anything else that y'all can think of with safety when the child is?
I mean, there's a ton of.
I know.
There's a ton
Yes,
more, but
yes.
I think we're running long.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us at Beneath the Branches.
Thank you for joining the Adoption and Foster Care Clinic for another episode of Beneath the Branches, a podcast for adoptive, foster, and kinship care families. We are deeply grateful to our sponsor, Show Hope, for their generous support in their continued work to break down barriers to adoption and support families every step of the way. Until next time, may you feel covered, connected, and never alone beneath the branches.